Welcome to the Quick 10 series. I am your host, Ray Davis, a child abuse pediatrician with the University of Illinois College of Medicine in Rockford. These 10-minute videos are designed to provide educators with easy access information on domestic violence, child abuse, and sexual abuse. They are brought to you by the Mayor's Office on Domestic Violence and Human Trafficking. Today, I will be covering some of the signs of child physical abuse. Goethe, a German philosopher and author, wrote in the 1700s that we see what we look for what we know. So I hope that at the end of our 10 minutes here, your knowledge will be a little bit better in the area of child abuse that might help you recognize when a child might need some help and intervention. There's no doubt that the teachers, our educators, have been and still are the largest group of mandated reporters. Every year, it's 20 to 25% or more of all the reports that we receive come from our teachers and educators, being the kindergarten through 12 grades. And if you add again any of the preschool and or licensed daycare to that, that statistic goes up even higher than that, 30, 35% or more. So a very important aspect to child abuse prevention is the report that gets the ball rolling, and the teachers are our biggest reporters. And I'm sure then you can see the problems that COVID, the pandemic 2020, has caused. In this past year, 2020, there's been roughly about 25 million kids between kindergarten and sixth grade attending public school that missed school for a median number of 54 days. That's almost 2 months that these grade schoolers are not being monitored by our closest watchers. And it's not just a problem in the US. Worldwide, it was estimated that 90% of children in the first and secondary grade levels were out of school at some point during this past year during the pandemic. To compound that, it has a rippling effect, because not only did we remove them from our best observers, our education department, the teachers, we stuck them in an environment where most of the abuse occurs. We quarantine these kids to their house and expose them to their perpetrators. If you look at the studies on child abuse, the overwhelming majority of physical abuse is caused by parents or a paramour of the parents, older siblings and or relatives of the parents, or sometimes babysitters in daycare. But that's where we've put these children. And so we've increased their exposure to the perpetrators, and we've kind of removed our camera or our eyes on these kids. So of course you can just imagine what that has done to the child abuse in this country. Fortunately, even with remote learning, we have some ability, and hopefully you'll have a much better ability when we're done here, to detect potential child abuse, to suspect child abuse. Most of the physical injuries that occur with child abuse, various studies, but over half of them occur in the head and neck region. And this is the area that's visible on Zoom and Google Duo and all the other, the Cisco WebEx and stuff that hopefully we're all using for these types of remote learning processes. So as long as their kids have their cameras on, as long as the teachers are keeping an eye on these kids, we have at least some ability to pick up on over half of these kids who may have been physically abused. Studies have shown that the lip area is the most common, cut lips and swelling of the lips from being hit and punched and slapped. However, it's not a particularly specific injury for child abuse. But there are other high-risk areas involving the head and neck that you really should be in tune with. These are the areas that if you see injuries on a child, will most of the time warrant a report to the Child Protection Services. The areas that we're really concerned about the most include the ears and the auricular area, as well as the chin or the jawline, the mandibular area, and then the neck itself. And those areas are high risk. Foreheads are not as concerning, the back of the head's not as concerning, but those areas are. And so things we can see. Mary Clyde Pierce has done extensive studies on physical injuries in kids out of Lurie's Children's Hospital, with great emphasis on the ears and the neck, the chin, frenulum, and the auricular area. Without a doubt, probably one of the hallmark findings are ear injuries. Bruising to the ear is a very uncommon, it may not seem that way to many people, but actually in the studies on child abuse, ear bruising is a very uncommon accidental injury and is highly concerning for child abuse. Now, there are different types of bruises to the ear, and anytime you see bruising on the top half of the ear, we call it the superior aspect of the helix, that outer part of the cartilage here, that's probably one of the highest concerns for child abuse. It's not a common area for accidental injury. And of course, the shape or size of the bruise is very important. So if you're seeing a bruise that is fingerprint-like or a small round oval bruise to the ear, particularly if it involves any part of the back of the ear, that is a big red flag for child abuse. And I recommend you report that to DCFS. It's an absolute report if you see, as in this child on the left, bruising on both ears. Most studies have shown that there's almost never an accidental cause for bruising to both ears, even on studies on children falling down stairs, more than 10 stairs. So it's a highly suspicious injury. Besides the ears, the auricular area. So it's not common to bruise the area right in front of the ear, and especially right behind the ear. Now, that poses a problem for educators because you can't see behind the ear. However, sometimes there's tricks you can get to help your visualization of these kids. Quite often you can play games. If you are concerned or you think you see an ear bruise, you can sometimes ask the kids, let's play a game here. Let's all do some stretching of our neck, because sometimes your neck gets tired looking at a Zoom lecture for a long time or talking with teachers. So let's all stretch way to the right, even stretch to the back, and hopefully you can see better the ears and maybe even the back of the ear. Little tricks like that can be done while you're in the classroom setting. So that's something that can be helpful. The neck injuries, again, very concerning. We see a couple of different types. You can see thumbprint-like bruising or single bruising in the front of the neck. That's seen frequently when kids are grabbed or choked. You can see fingerprint type on the back side of the neck, again, where kids are being grabbed by an adult or choked. They can be grabbed with fingers in front as well. So you can see either of those on either side. And of course, then there's the ligature or strangulation-like mark that can be seen. That injury is a fairly common injury when kids are grabbed by the back of the shirt or grabbed by the front of the t-shirt and swung around by a parent or a perpetrator who's mad or upset with them. And so the shirt itself causes bruising or an abrasion along the neckline. The chin is a high concern for area, particularly underneath the chin or along the jaw line. So if you see bruising under the chin, if you see it along the mandible, the jawbone itself, those are highly suspicious injuries for abuse and should be reported. Even if you see just one or two bruises, now this child has a lot of bruises, they're grouped or clustered. That's another high risk factor. In fact, when you look at studies on child abuse, when you see grouping or clustering of bruises, that's one of the highest predictors of child abuse, regardless of where that's located on the body. And then of course the bruises or injuries that look like someone slapped their face. When you see these purplish reddish petechial bruises, particularly in a kind of a straight line appearance across the cheek, one side or both sides, highly suspicious and needs to be reported. Now the problem is you often have a hard time seeing those. You now have some idea and have seen a few pictures of what injuries might look like and what you can report, but how do you always see them? There are sometimes tricks to increase visualization. You can, as I said, play games with the kids. You can, if they're younger kids, say, we're going to make faces, and I want people to get close to their camera and make a funny face. I want them to back up and turn their head around like they're playing a game. You can have them do stretching exercises because they're getting tired and look up and look down. All these kind of things can be done. It's sometimes nice to get a history from a child. There's concerns about how you can access a child and talk with a child in a secure fashion. Now, definitely you want to be careful about trying to ask questions or be imposing when the child is in their own home where a perpetrator may reside. So you do need to be careful. But sometimes there are ways to talk with kids. You can ask them or play a game. I want to make sure everybody's doing their own work. Show me the rest of your room. I want to make sure there's no grown-ups or big people around so that I know you're doing the work. And of course, in the process, you know, it might be okay to commute with them or communicate with them. If you can obtain secure chat, if they know how to type fairly well, you can try to do a secure chat. You don't want to expose children or ask questions in front of other children. Some of these Zooms and other formats have the ability to place other children in wait rooms, which would allow you to interact with that child directly one-on-one. And the last thing to watch for, of course, is if you're seeing a change in a child. If you've been going through these Zoom lectures and now you're starting to see a child that seems to be having more sad expression, sad face, doesn't always want to log on with the camera. Other things that might make you concerned, something's going on in the household. Remember, stress is what triggers most of the abuse to children. And with the COVID quarantine, the loss of jobs, increase in alcohol sales, there's no doubt stress and violence has increased. But being aware of some of these injuries and learning some tips on how you can try to better visualize these may help you be able to determine when you need to make a report.